Hi there. Welcome to today's episode of my 30-day journey on fractions, where I attempt to solve all fractions related problems that are essentially and specially selected from common entrance pass questions, GSSC, SSC, and even SAT, which is standard aptitude test. In today's episode, we will be tackling part 2 of our applications of mathematics on real-life word problems on fractions. Before we delve into today's lesson, as usual, please be generous and kind enough to click on the subscription button below this video to get notified of more educative and academic lessons like this. See you in a bit. Okay, so let's look at our first question for today. Okay, the first question for today says, Roy spends 1/5 of his income on food and 1/3 of the remainder on his car. If he then has $286 left, what is his income? Now let's try and understand this question as a whole. Roy spends 1/5 of his income on food and 1/3 of the remainder. So we are going to underline this keyword as a point of attention. 1/3 of the remainder on his car. If he then has $286 left, what is his income? So let's interpret straight away. Now Roy spends 1/5 of his income on food. So I am going to type that food. He spent 1/5 of his income on food, and then 1/3 of the remainder on his car. So we are going to write car. He spent 1/3 of the remainder. What do they mean by the remainder? The remainder means since he spent 1/5 of his income on food, then the remainder means that the remnant from this 1/5. If he spent 1/5, that is 1 out of 5 of his income was spent on food. So the remainder will be 4/5. So spending 1/5 of his income on food, and then the remainder will be 4/5. So and then for car, he spent 1/3 of this remainder. 1/3 of this remainder, which is 4/5, which is out of this 1/5. The whole fraction is 5, and then he spent 1 out of this whole fraction of 5 on food. That means if you spend 1 out of this 5, the remainder is 4 out of the 5. So this remainder is spent 1/3 of this remainder. So off will become times 1/3 of the remainder, which is 1/3 of 4/5. And then if we calculate this, we are going to have 4/15. So he spent 4/15 of his income on car. Then let's proceed on to the question. It then says, if he then has $286 left, what is his income? So we say, since 4/5 is now what is spent on car, right? And then he has $286 left. What is his income? So that means we have to find whatever that is left here. So if he now spend 4 out of 15 on his car, 4, remember I'm saying 4 out of 15. Don't forget that the rudiment of fraction means a fraction is part of a whole. So this 15 here is the whole fraction, and then this 4 is a part of it. So 4 out of 15. So if you spend 4 out of 15 on car, then the remnant will be 11 out of 15. So this 11 out of 15 represents fraction left. So fraction left is 11 out of 15. So this 11 out of 15 represents the amount that is as well left. So represent. Now the question says if he then has $286 left. So this $286 that is left is equivalent to this fraction, which is 11/15. So 11/15 of the entire money is this $286. Okay, so this 11/15 represents $286. Now, as it is, then we now need to find what is his income. His income means his actual fund or his actual income. So we'll say his income is equals to, now his income will then be this 15. Don't forget 11 out of 15 of his income is $286, which is what is left. So 11 out of 15. Look at the word out of 15. So that means his income is 15. So to find his income, we'll say 15. We are going to invert this fraction. 15/11 times $286. So we are using what we have to find what we don't have. What we have is the fraction of the money that is left, which is 11 over 15, and then the amount that is left, which is $286. So this 11 represents this $286. So the overall income is now 15. So we flip this fraction over 15 over 11 times $286. Then now we find a common factor. 11 and 11 will give us 1, and then 11 and 286, let's make it 2 by 2. So 11 and 28, we are going to have 2, because 2 times 11 gives you 22. And then if you take away 22 from 28, we will be left with 2. We will be left with 6 rather. So 22 out of 28 will be left with 6. So 11 and 66, we are going to have 6. So that means we have 26 here. So that means what we have left in the numerator is 15 times 26. 15 in 20 places. So if we split this number, expand this number, we are going to have 20 plus 6. So 15 in 20 places will give us 300. And then 15 in 6 places will give us 90. So that means his entire income is $390. So and that is that about question 1. So let's move on to question number 2. Okay, question number 2. A lorry was 3 over 5 full of fuel. 21 liters was then added, and then it is now 5 over 8 full. How many liters of fuel can the tank hold? Okay, so a lorry was 3 over 5 full of fuel. I will decide to interpret this as a lorry was, using the word was 3 over 5 full of fuel. So I will say initial gauge of the tank. Initial gauge. Now you could decide to use another descriptions for your interpretation. So initial gauge is the tank was 3 over 5 full. That means it isn't full, it is 3 over 5 full. Okay, so and then the question posed and said 21 liters was then added. 21 liters was then added. So I'm going to pen that to be quantity added. Quantity added is 21 liters. Now you need to know the difference. Note the difference between the fractions and then the quantity. So quantities of liters added is 21 liters. So now if 21 liters was added, that means we need to find quantities of fraction that was as well added. So then say after being added, after 21 liters being added to the initial gauge, it is now 5 over 8 full. So I'm going to describe that to the current gauge. Current gauge is now 5 over 8 full. Now what does this mean? It means that initially the tank was 3 over 5 full, and after these quantities of liters of fuel was added, then the gauge became 5 over 8 full. That means a fraction was added, a fraction of quantities was added to this initial gauge to now have this quantity. So to find that fraction of quantity that was added to this to now get this, that means we have to find a difference between the current gauge and the initial gauge. So I'm going to say added fraction. I'm going to say added fraction is equals to 5 over 8 minus 3 over 5. So 5 over 8 minus 3 over 5. As usual, we find the LCM of 5 and 8, which is going to give you 40, and then 8 in 40 will give you 5. And you use the value you've gotten to multiply the numerator. So 8 in 40 is 5. Then the 5 times this 5, we are going to have 25 minus, then 5 in 40 will give us 8. 8 times this 3, which is the numerator, we are going to get what? 24. So that means 25 minus 24, we are going to have 1 over 40. So 1 over 40 of the quantity of fuel, 1 over 40 of the quantity of fuel was added to this 3 over 5 to now have a what? A new gauge. So since this is the quantity added, 21 liters, that means 21 liters represents this fraction, because this is the fraction of quantity that was added. 1 over 40 was the fraction of quantity that was added. So 21 liters represents, I'm going to write the word represents 1 over 40. So if 21 liters represents 1 over 40, Then the question now says, how many liters of fuel can the tank hold? That means the capacity of the tank. So to find the capacity of the tank, since we now know that this 21 liters was the quantity of fuel that was added, and then this fraction is the equivalence of this quantity that was added. That means this 21 liters represents this 1 over 40. So if 1 out of 40 is 21 liters, that means 2 out of this 40 will be what? 21 times 2, and then 3 out of this 40 will be 21 times 3. So that means the total quantity or the capacity of the tank is this 40, and 1 out of it is this 21 liter. So to find the full capacity, we just simply say 40, as I've been doing in the previous lesson. We flip this fraction, which is 40 over 1. So there is no need putting over 1, because 40 over 1 will still give us what? 40. So 40 times 21. Now 40 times 21, and that is going to give us so what we do here is 21 times 4, and that is going to give us 84. So this is 840 liters is the capacity of the tank. So let's move on to question number. Now, question number 3 is almost like question number 2. It says a tank is 3 over 4 full of water. If 60 liters more are required to fill it up, how many liters can the tank hold? So it's almost like this question number 2. So let's delve into the solution. A tank is 3 over 4 full of water, so I'm still going to use gauge to describe that also. But in this case, I'm not going to use I'm going to use initial gauge as well, because it changed from a gauge to another gauge. So I'm going to use initial gauge. So initial gauge of the tank is 3 over 4. It is 3 over 4 full. Now, take note in your mind, if it is 3 over 4 full, that means it is 3 out of 4 of the tank. So that means the remainder, or the remnant, or the remainder to make the tank to be full is 1 over 4. Now, then the question proceeds and said, if 60 liters more are required, so I'm going to interpret that to the quantity required to fill up the tank is 60 liters. So if the quantity required to fill up the tank is the 60 liters, we need to find an equivalence of this 60 liters in fraction. That means what fraction represents this 60 liters. So to do that, that's so easy. Since the tank was initially 3 over 4 full, then the remainder is 1 out of 4. That means for the tank to become full, we need to add 1 over 4 more liters of fuel to make it full. Since it is 3 over 4 full, that means 3 out of 4. When we say 3 out of 4, it means take away 3 from 4, but we're left with 1. So that means it's remaining 1 out of 4 to make the tank to be full. So this 1 out of 4, or 1 over 4 that is remaining, is the equivalence of this 60 liters. So the quantity, which is the quantity required to fill up the tank. So I'm going to say 60 liters, which represents 1 over 4. So 1 over 4 of the tank. So 60 liters represent 1 over 4 of the tank, which is what is required to fill up the tank. So if 60 liters represents 1 over 4 of the tank, then we move on to the last question, the main questions of the problem. How many liters can the tank hold? So when we say how many liters can the tank hold, is the same thing as capacity of the tank. So therefore, capacity of the tank is equals to, so if 60 liters represents 1 over 4 of the tank, that is 1. This 60 liters represents 1. That means the full tank will be this what? This 4. So we say 4, we invert, so 4 over 1. So writing 4 over 1 is unnecessary. So because 4 over 1 will still give us what? 4. So 4 times 60, 4 times 6, and that will give us 24. So 4 times 60 will give us what? 240 liters. So 240 liters is the capacity of the tank. So let's move straight to question number 4 for today's episode. Now, question number 4, which will be our final question for today. Says Annabelle went to a shopping mall with £10. She spent £4 on meat, half of what was left on fish, and one third of what was left on vegetables. How much had she left? Okay, so Annabelle went to a shopping mall with £10. That means Annabelle has a total funds has a total fund of £10. And then the question says she spent £4 on meat. So I'm going to write meat is equals to £4. She spent £4 on meat. That means if she spent £4 on meat out of this £10, so the remnant or the remainder is £6. Annabelle has £6 left on her. It is important that we start writing the remainder because this question generally talked about left, 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 and left. So that is why it is important we start pitching down or documenting down our remainder. So she spent £4 on meat, and then half of what was left on fish. So fish, she spent half of what was left. Half means 1/2 times half of what was left. That means after spending £4 on meat, what she had left is £6. So she spent half of this £6. Half of £6 will give us £3. So meaning that she spent £3 on fish. So if she spent £3 on fish, out of £6 that was left initially, she will have a remainder of £3 now. Please take note and don't get confused. She spent half of what she had left before, which is £6 on fish, and that was £3. So if she spent £3 on fish, if we take away this £3 from £6, that means she has £3 left. Okay, and then the question proceeds on to say that and 1/3 of what was left on vegetables. So she spent 1/3 of what was left. So what was left is now £3. So 1/3 of what was left. So she spent 1/3 of £3 on veg. So 1/3 of £3 will give us £1. I mean, she spent £1 on vegetable. Please take note, because this is actually a trickish and a little bit confusing question that many different people may tend to have different answers. Okay, so she spent £1 on vegetable, remember. So if she spent 1/3 of £3, which is £1 on vegetable, and initially she had £3 left, so that means £1 out of £3 that she had left. So the remainder of her money is £2, since she spent £1 out of £2. So she now had £2 left. And finally, the main question now says, how much had she left? So she had this £2 left. So we are just going to document that. I'll put that down to be funds left is equals to £2. And as simple as that. So that will be the end of our episode today on 30-day journey of fractions. Please don't forget to click on the subscription buttons below this video to get notified of the subsequent lesson on this episode, on this series. I will see you in the next lesson.